Welcome to this week's BitShares Dev Hangout. This recording is brought to you by the Beyond Bitcoin crew. We welcome all BitShares members to join us weekly and discuss the latest news, updates, and developments. If you'd like to participate in our next meeting, then please join us live on Mumble every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Did you know the Beyond Bitcoin show now has a registered delegate? Please consider voting if you find our Hangouts and recordings useful. The delegate name to vote for is fuzzy.beyondbitcoin. Again, that's fuzzy.beyondbitcoin. The Beyond Bitcoin crew would like to send out a big thank you to everyone who's already voted and allowing us the opportunity to serve the BitShares ecosystem and our valued community members. So once again, welcome and please enjoy the show.
Welcome to another Beyond Bitcoin Hangout. Today we are joined again by Bytemaster from the BitShares flagship DAC. For those of you who are new to BitShares, Bytemaster is the chief engineer of BitShares and the man responsible for delegated proof of stake. If you want to learn more about his philosophy on crypto projects, economics, and politics, please visit bytemaster.bitshares.org/?r equals Beyond Bitcoin. That is bytemaster.bitshares.org/?r equals Beyond Bitcoin. If you enjoy these Hangouts and would like to keep them open and running, please consider voting for the fuzzy.beyondbitcoin delegate. Follow us on Twitter at beyond_Bitcoin and share our recorded Hangouts on social media with all your friends and family. An explanation of our format for these Hangouts. We will start with a 5 to 10 minute project update from Bytemaster. We will then move on to community questions. As I am also a community member, I will be asking my own questions and offering my own input. However, if you do not have a mic or are uncomfortable asking out loud, I will gladly try to ask your questions for you if you post it in the Mumble client's embedded chat box. With that said, Bytemaster, thank you for joining us. And would you like to get started with your project update?
Sure. This past week, we have been making a lot of progress, putting out lots of little issues with the Light wallet that have prevented it from being released. I believe Nathan has everything in place now. You expect to see that soon. We had hoped to have it out earlier this week. It's going to come out for the Mac only initially. The Windows release will take a little bit longer, primarily because we have to build an installer for Windows. So that's the main focus. The other thing we've been working on this week is focusing on our core technology, eliminating features that are slowing us down, and delivering a stable product. That is going to be our focus going forward. In the past several sessions, we have talked about all kinds of ideas, everything from bingo to prediction markets. These are great things, but we already have a great thing called bit assets. We want to take the features that we have today, polish them, and make them the best that they can be, rather than spread ourselves more thin. As you may have noticed in the past week or month, the price of BitShares has been falling along with the market, but also relative to Bitcoin. We need to be hyper-focused and conserve resources. We cannot spread ourselves too thin. So that's the main thing that we are doing is bug fixes, performance upgrades, and usability upgrades of the existing system. Maybe once the BitShares market cap starts climbing significantly, we will be able to start pursuing some of these grander visions. But for now, we do not have the financial resources to do more than make what we have rock solid. And I think that will probably be the most profitable way of increasing BitShares adoption. It seems like, based on the text that everyone is extremely happy with that approach. So it looks like we are all in agreement.
Well, I can say that there's also some interesting things going on in the background. I know that Rune has a bit asset that he and Riverhead are working on to really help push forward with the bit assets. And it seems like there's a lot of good stuff going on behind the scenes. Are you comfortable telling anybody about any of the stuff that's going on behind the scenes as far as positive developments go?
Can you restate the question?
Sure. Well, first off, let's make it simple, I guess. Have you paid much attention to Rune and Riverhead's user-issued asset?
I have not.
It is CFS Gold. Is that what it's called, Riverhead?
Yes, it is CFS Gold. Yeah, it's the whole crypto hedge project, and it is growing and it's going well. But we're sort of in a state of flux right now, so I can't really go into too many details. But in a week or so, we'll be having a more formal update on the status of that project.
On related projects, I know that there is a silver off-ramp for bit silver to physical silver that is being developed. I don't know when it'll come out, but I know that there's people working on it.
See, this is great news, and I know on my end there are an ever-increasing number of people who are interested in coming on here to talk about user-issued assets or delegate candidacies. So things are pushing forward on these fronts, and I'm actually very bullish. I look at this as a moment of complete and utter. I wish I had more money that I could spend that I could just take out of my account, but my wife would notice, so I can't take any money out of our savings to buy in. However, if I could, this would be a moment when I'd be buying in.
Well, they say that the time to buy in is when there's blood in the streets, right?
Yes. Unfortunately, many of the developers are being forced to sell because the tax man cometh. So please buy in now.
Well, and we have a lot. I don't know if many of you spend a whole lot of time on Twitter, but Twitter is flooding with bit shares and bit USD and different bit assets. So if you go on Twitter and you search for these terms, you will find a highly increased number of pushes out into the Twitter sphere. So I'm just letting you guys know this because for a long time, our marketing, we as a community just focused on, we allowed the centralized, hired marketing team to work on everything, and the community has largely come together and is really doing some amazing stuff and pushing out a lot of information to the community, the crypto community and beyond. So this stuff is going to pay dividends in the long run. It's just, it might hurt a little bit initially for some people to watch if they only watch the price. But I look at the community, at how everything's going, and we have a solid core of people who really believe in this project and are going to make it go through. And I actually read a quote from you, Bytemaster, on Twitter that says that when the people leave the blockchain, that's when it dies. So as long as we have a core community and that core community keeps growing, which is exactly what I'm seeing, I feel good.
The nice thing about BitShares is the bit assets almost work at any scale. Now, as long as there is a group of people that want to hedge and speculate, then the bit assets will continue to work. So let's talk about some changes and simplifications that we're doing. In the past, we've talked about relative orders. We have them implemented, and a lot of the tests are passing. The issue is there exists corner cases. Those corner cases open up the system to potential attack, and we haven't felt comfortable releasing those features. The main concern is too much control placed in the price feed. That the price feed is never going to be able to adjust fast enough to prevent other traders from taking advantage of the relative orders. That's part of the problem. The other part is the combinatoric explosion in the number of order types and how they can pair together. It's one thing when you only have to match bids and asks. It's a little bit more complicated when you throw in shorts and covers. But now if you throw in relative bids and relative asks, you've got increasing levels of complexity. And that's basically slowing down our release of certain fixes to the market engine. Recognizing that relative orders, we have trading bots now that can do the same thing as relative orders. We think that those trading bots are always going to make the relative orders unprofitable. So, like I said in the beginning, we're going to go for simplicity. Focus on making the simple stuff work very well. Relative orders have been removed from 1.0. In fact, 1.0 is probably going to look very close to the feature set that we have right now, with perhaps some of the upgrades to the user-issued assets that have also been implemented and are in testing right now. I haven't reviewed the milestone assignments. That's been what Vikram has been doing. My experience with it has been that they are a rough priority of groups of features that we try to release. The dates on them are subject to change, as always.
I have a question about user-issued assets and the design of them.
Sure.
When you designed the user-issued asset scheme, and you created the idea that when you created the user-issued asset and then you would allocate it to a specific account, therefore making the sale of the asset up to the individual, did you consider leaving that last step out so that the people could purchase? The registration is exactly the same as it is, but the purchase of the user-issued asset would be done more or less from the blockchain, and then the proceeds of the sale would go to whoever it is that registered it.
How is that different from issuing yourself the asset and put in a giant sell order?
Well, as it is, you pretty much have to sell the asset yourself and market it yourself. Whereas the way I was thinking of it is if the blockchain advertised the asset exists, I mean, it already is doing that to a certain degree. But when you purchase it, don't you have to contact the person that issued it in order to purchase it, rather than just purchasing it from the blockchain as you would a BitUSD or something else?
You don't have to contact them. They can have a standing sell order in the market on the blockchain.
Maybe there's something I'm missing. I'll look into it a little bit more, but thanks for your answer.
I don't know what's going on with Shapeshift. Someone asked about that.
Gento, do you know anything about this?
No, I don't know anything about it right now. I can reach out to them and see what the deal is. Up until this point, as far as I knew, it was running very smoothly.
They might be upgrading prior to the hard fork.
Yeah, we did just have that hard fork, and I'm going through the upgrade process right now, so that's probably a good call.
They're still listed on Shapeshift. There's still options to drop down. They're blocked out. But I feel that if they were removing them, they wouldn't be in the menu anymore. So it's probably the upgrade.
And just so anybody knows what this is, they're upgrading the version, correct?
Yes.
Data Security Note asks, what does it take to become a gateway for fiat to BTS or a bit asset? My understanding is that it is essential to have gateways like this to make BTS to fiat efficient. If so, is there some kind of technical documentation available somewhere?
Some of the core developers from Synaptica, Dan Notestein and crew, are working on a gateway infrastructure. In the process, they're learning the requirements of becoming a fiat gateway. The question is, how do we make them? Are they essential? Well, they certainly help. I think that the escrow features that people are learning to use from the command line right now will allow us to do a local Bitcoin style on-ramp where you can trade wire transfer USD for BitUSD on a peer-to-peer fashion. We just need to orchestrate that. one of the things I have asked Valentine to do is to make the escrow function available in the GUI so it's easier to use. And once it's available and easy to use in the GUI, then we can really start pushing that as a on and off ramp. What does this mean? This means that someone like me, who's got to pay taxes and has some BitUSD, I could go on there and say, hey, I'm looking to sell $10,000 worth of BitUSD. And someone else can wire transfer me the money, and I do an escrow transfer to them. And then we just did a trade and got money into the blockchain easily in a peer-to-peer fashion. I think that there would be a lot of people that would find that a very convenient way of getting on and off of BitShares without creating any kind of money transmission business, because everyone is just doing it for their own personal reasons and not for a business.
If those same people did it multiple times and created a pattern of money changing, though, then the issue would be on them as a money changing business, correct?
If they are trading money two ways on a regular basis, then they'd probably have a problem. But if they are doing it one way and then taking the proceeds and doing something with it other than buying back in, it's hard to claim that they're a money transmission business. It's just they happen to be someone who has to sell a lot. Maybe they want to buy in later. So it all comes down into the intent of what you're doing. If you're doing it for personal use, you're not money transmission. If you're doing it as a business to make money on the spreads, well, now it starts to get a little bit more questionable. The biggest way to avoid any issues there is to always do it at 1-to-1, $1, 1 BitUSD, instead of specifying some kind of spread.
So on that note, what exactly is the incentive for somebody to do this?
If you're looking to move money into or out of BitShares, there's a bunch of people in both camps. A lot of people want to move money in, and a lot of people want to take money out. We just need a way of pairing those people up. So it's probably a really efficient way for whales to get in and out, especially if they arrange to know who they're dealing with and have an escrow agent who knows both parties. I think that it can really facilitate a lot of movement into and out of the space without all the overhead of going through the existing exchanges. So
then the incentive is just really to eliminate overhead and kind of just an ease of use, if you will, between, say, large stakeholders and people that want to move in, or out of the system.
Exactly.
Well, if someone was doing this as a professional service, they could easily build their own front end to it that would specifically tailor towards the service.
Moving the money as a service or facilitating pairing people up?
Facilitating the escrow, pairing people up. Like if you were an escrow service, you could develop your own front end. It wouldn't have to depend on, the core developers putting something out.
That is certainly true. So yeah, I'd really like to encourage a Craigslist for BitUSD. If people start organizing to post buy and sell requests on Craigslist in every single area, that's free advertising for BitShares. So
if I understand this correctly, so say I want to participate, I would just list in my local Craigslist saying, for sale 100 BitUSD for 100 USD, and that's pretty much it. And then if someone responds, plan to meet up with them and exchange bits for cash.
Exactly.
Well, it's probably fairly safe going that direction as opposed to the other way where you're wandering around with fistfuls of cash to random Craigslist people. So I think it actually works. I mean, it works well for, what's that service that does it with Bitcoin? There's a very similar service.
Local Bitcoins?
Yeah, that's the one. I don't, I guess it varies by area. In Philadelphia here, it could be a bit dangerous. But I guess precautions can be taken.
Packing heat is one way. Arhaga asks, can escrow agents be multi-sig right now? If not, wouldn't that be desirable? In fact, if I understand the escrow feature correctly, the sender, receiver, and agent of an escrow are BTS account names, when instead I think they should be conditions, which can optionally be multi-sig.
This is one of those things where simple, easy to use approach is what's there. Making it multi-sig, eventually all accounts will be multi-sig enabled. So when we say an account is a single signature, that is only currently. Eventually all accounts will be multi-sig.
So will that be something where you just enable it?
Right now the accounts have keys. Eventually they'll have conditions, basically multi-sig authority conditions associated with them.
So if somebody has their own account, they can choose to make it multi-sig at any point in time by creating these conditions and assigning them to it, or unlocking them, basically.
Right. We're going to provide an ability to set a multi-sig upgrade to an account. But what that falls under the category of new feature, therefore is not a priority. Right now, the only thing we will be focusing on for the next little while is to bug fix and performance.
Have we had the community conversation? I mean, I've been on the forums lurking as I always do, but maybe I've missed it. Have we talked about recently the potential for developers to have more than one delegate?
I'd like to go on the record. I've been talking with the guys about it. The developers are going to stick with a single delegate per developer. I know there was a big debate over whether or not Cass, who's one of the most favorite delegates out there, our graphic designer, he wanted more than one delegate position, and that caused a lot of debate. After heavy discussion with Chinese community and people here, we have arranged for alternative ways of getting people paid. Now that does not involve additional delegate positions.
Tamer asks, is there going to be a debit card connected to BTS and BitUSD?
We have friends that are in that business. Their own business has been taking longer to get off the ground. And so we will be hopefully integrating with them as we mature. Eventually, yes, I would expect that.
And along those lines, we're about just a little bit over a year old. So I don't know if anybody remembers back to when Bitcoin was over a year old, but it seems to take a little bit of time for these things to organically grow. And the awesome thing about this community is it does seem like it's organically growing. However, like Bytemaster, you just said, when you're relying on organic growth, sometimes, you're relying on people getting their own startups up and running. And if they're organically growing as well, it takes, it's a little bit harder to guarantee that it's just going to go to the moon overnight. With that said,
let's just put it this way. There's a big opportunity for someone to buy in, to create an exchange and then buy in and then announce. There's lots of profit to be made by getting into this business. The only question is time, resources, and regulations. And everyone is moving as fast as humanly possible. Obviously, when you're not inside the project, it can seem like it's forever until Christmas comes. But Christmas eventually does come.
Well, Solomon Solars and Cents says, what is the actual demographic for BitShares that we are trying to reach?
BitShares solves a problem that is universal, applies to all people. People need money, people need savings, people need investments, people need exchanges. BitShares provides that. In theory, BitShares could replace government. There's a time and place for different demographics. Right now, I would say we are focusing on the early adopter demographic. These are the forward thinkers, the entrepreneurs, the people who get involved with something when it's risky because they believe in something. That is who I think we're targeting in the short term. Longer term, it is everyone.
Speaking of replacing government, this is a very, I know that we're not going to be talking too much about anything beyond the bit assets at this point in time, but are there any updates on Vote?
Vote is primarily working on marketing BitShares right now. We had a meetup this week that went really well. We got a lot of people actually installed with wallets and gave them free samples. A lot of positive feedback, new people coming into BitShares there. The primary thing Vote depends upon is ID verification, which I believe is tied in with gateways. I would not expect to see a deployed voting solution until after we get the core features of BitShares up.
There's an interesting post that was on the forums, and I don't know if anybody else has seen it, but it was mentioning something that I believe the post was named something to the effect of, is Bitcoin stealing BitShares technology? And it was talking about, it directed us to a post about masternodes and them using masternodes to effectively do what BitShares is doing with hiring and all that good stuff. Do you have any information regarding that, or have you kept up on that?
I briefly scanned the thread. I don't understand or didn't read the implementation details of the system, but I think someone summed it up nicely. They might try to add something like we have, but they still have the burden of mining. So there's that. They're basically adding an additional expense on top of their current expenses. It's going to involve a change in the protocol somehow in order to pay these people. I don't know how they're planning on changing the protocol, who they're going to take the money from. Are they going to take the money from miners or from Bitcoin holders or increase transaction fees? Those are the choices. Be very interesting to see how that all plays out. But I think people are starting to catch on that faster block confirmations are extremely desirable. And decentralization is important. It's always harder to bolt on new features than it is to design something from the ground up. And I think that the Bitcoin community is going to end up with a Frankenstein solution as they try to evolve. I really believe their best bet is to figure out what the correct solution is, whether it's DPoS or something else, do a snapshot and have everyone upgrade. That would be far better for Bitcoin than a bunch of these other measures. But I don't think they'll be able to change too much.
It's interesting because I remember it was approximately maybe 2 or 3 months ago when Darkcoin came out with this instant DEX protocol, and they were touting it being instant transactions. And I'd come to, after doing some research on it, I'd come to learn that the instant transactions were under 5 or 10 seconds, but they were done on a small test net. And with a little further reading, it seemed, at least from what I was reading, that as the network scales, it will not be able to sustain those transaction times, and that we're looking actually at something closer to 20 to 30 seconds. Is anybody here familiar with this?
I read that comment as well. It makes sense if you are relying on a Ripple style consensus where you broadcast the transaction and you get a bunch of people to sign off that they've seen it. A lot of the big mining pools, for instance, that as the transaction volume increases and the number of signatures that you have to wait for increase, it's going to take longer to do. Nice thing about delegated proof of stake is there is a fixed schedule. Things just happen and they don't have to wait on unknown block confirmation times or random anonymous individuals who are responsible for potentially producing a block. I don't know how these instant confirmations can work. Suppose an attacker gets extremely lucky. They broadcast a transaction, it gets instantly confirmed, but then they produce the next block that includes a double spend transaction. The only way that you can get instant confirmation is if you have all the block producers sign off on it. I suppose it all depends on what your definition of instant is. If instant means it's high probability of being irreversible, then we almost have that today with Bitcoin. As soon as you broadcast a transaction, the network doesn't allow you to broadcast invalid transactions. The mining pools are all generally high integrity. So there's only a small percentage of miners out there who could potentially produce a block that includes a double spend. And you'd probably have to communicate with them directly in order for them to receive your transaction. I don't know how much more secure your transaction gets, but if you have the top 4 mining pools sign off on it, then you've got a 70% chance that your transaction is going to be included in the next block. Who knows how this is all going to play out? I think there's a lot more overhead with the instant transactions than there is with DPoS. So it's never going to be as efficient.
And they won't be able to, the users of the ecosystem will not have control over, through like a voting mechanism, which people have this power of block signing, correct?
Correct.
So instead of having to rely on 101 essentially mining pools who are voted into power to be able to do this based on the work that they've provided to build the network, they're just forced to kind of accept that these, 4 largest pools are going to do this and leave it at that.
I think you're going to see the exact same thing with all systems. I think Ripple is going to have longer confirmation times as it scales as well.
What are your thoughts on Ripple? Speaking of which, there was recently a Let's Talk Bitcoin show where they talked to Ripple, and the Ripple guys actually were talking about their strategy to be adopted being similar to how the internet was adopted, by going to the large industry players who were going to be potential competitors and inviting them to essentially be the leaders of the new wave of technology.
I think that that's a really solid strategy. It's unfortunate that people that are best positioned to profit the most from the crypto revolution are the current banking systems, the current people in those places, and not the average man. But I think that has a lot to do with the nature of the average individual out there who is lazy and risk adverse. So if everyone were to just say, hey, let's all get on board with BitUSD and start using it, started doing everything peer-to-peer, you could have the little man profit and the banks shut out and cut out of the entire system. Unfortunately, most people are going to prefer to have the banking system as a whole adopt some form of crypto. I would really like to see us positioned with and adopt a strategy similar to Ripple in terms of getting partners on board. I think there's a lot of good things that Ripple's doing in their approach. We can learn a lot from them.
What do you think about the approach? There's a gentleman named Brother G on the forums who just came on here this week, and we'll be having a hangout with him at some point in time in the future. But he was talking about the unbanked. And there are places where generally the legacy banking system really doesn't work too much for the everyday person. And he was talking about essentially kind of what you were talking about, Bytemaster, with there's almost an apathy to the people who are in first world countries because the banking system generally functions as they would expect it to. Now, for those of us who pay attention, really pay attention, and are critical thinkers and ask questions about how we can improve this world, which is a group of people, all of you, are part of, or else you wouldn't be here. That's not generally the representative population or sample of the greater population in these first world countries, though, right? However, in the third world countries and even the second world countries, you have people who are underbanked and underserved by these institutions. And in fact, we might even be able to argue that they are quite the opposite of being served. They're actually being leached off of in many ways, and that they are very acutely aware of this. What are your thoughts on Brother John's or Brother G's strategy to bring BitShares and these types of technologies to the third world countries where the population might not be as apathetic and might feel this pain of the current legacy systems more acutely?
The nice thing about a decentralized community is that we can do it all. It only takes one person in that area who knows those people. I cannot do anything to help those communities directly. We need people who are liaisons between first world and third world countries to educate and help them adopt it. Perhaps the biggest thing that we can do to help them is to get solutions that are lighter weight. There is a known issue where our wallet works perfectly fine if you have a modern computer with a solid state drive and lots of RAM, but it does not work so well if you are using 8-year-old or even 4-year-old computer technology. So that is the single biggest issue we're looking at right now. Someone asked a question, Rune did, about yield harvesting. Yield harvesting is what happens when someone goes short to themselves. They have no net exposure to BitUSD. They're effectively long BitShares, but because they happen to have BitUSD, they are collecting some of the yield. The process of collecting some of the yield reduces the yield for the other BitUSD holders and basically pushes the yield towards zero. If that was a very profitable approach, there's huge opportunity to short to yourself right now. BitUSD is paying 2.7%. And I don't believe there are many shorts that are currently willing to sell because we're in a bear market. So plenty of opportunity to short to yourself at below 2.7% and make some money. This has the effect of discouraging BitUSD adoption, or more likely doing what it's going to do and push the yield of BitUSD to be similar to the USD return everywhere else in the world. We can't have a 10% return on BitUSD without having a flood of people coming to buy BitUSD, which is going to drive down the relative yield of BitUSD. I'm afraid at the end of the day, the interest rate offered by BitUSD will only be competitive with other interest rates. It will not be obscene.
I think it goes further than that, though, because the best strategy for shorting, unless there's like literally a short wall at all times, would be that thing I talked about in the thread where like it's better to just have a bot going that just self-shorts every 24 hours. And then when you want to actually short, then you just sell like normally. And then basically what ends up happening is a system that you described yesterday, like this simpler system for issuing assets.
Exactly.
And then like Arhak, he made the point that this can only happen in bear markets, and in bull markets there will always be like, or they can form like huge short walls that stay up at all times and then force people to compete on interest. But I just think the assumption that there will be these short walls for more than 30 days is like, I mean, in the long run we should expect basically everyone to have smart wallets, right, that basically do this self-shorting at all times.
I don't know if everyone's going to be having smart wallets. I mean, I think there's a few people like you and Arhag and a couple others that really, and obviously Bytemaster and Toastin that really get this, and I think the rest of us maybe not so much.
Right, but if there's like a wallet that offers like, oh, this wallet pays interest on your BTS, and another wallet doesn't pay interest on your BTS, then you should always just take the one that pays interest on your BTS, wouldn't you? And then everyone would do that, and then the interest would go to zero.
What would be the incentive for someone to release a wallet like that?
Just a better wallet. But I think this is some sort of like fundamental issue because of the way like the yield is distributed among many people and then doesn't have like a term limit. Normally like because it's fully fungible and it's fully backed, but still you can like trade it at any time. So it's not like being a liquidity provider in Bitfinex or something. Like I just don't see how it can actually be economically possible to offer yield this way.
I agree. The yield on bid assets is going to be close to zero, but it's not going to be zero. It's a nice bonus, but it's not necessarily where the money is going to be at. The real solution to this is a future feature of a bond market that allows people to make arbitrary loans backed by arbitrary collateral, where both the long and the short, the borrower and the lender, have terms that are locked in. That would cause the interest to go between those two parties and not to be diluted among everyone else. And then what people will do is they'll buy BitUSD so that they can lend it at interest to people who want to short at arbitrary prices.
Yeah, and then if we're going to do this anyway, because this is a much better way of offering yield and it makes perfect sense, then can't we just isn't it better then to make that system you described, which is a much simpler way to handle the bid assets in general?
All right, so what he's talking about is I described a system where anyone can short to themselves at any time, but they have to cover within 30 days. That system is not viable because if you can short to yourself at any time, then the 30-day requirement is not really enforceable to someone who's only shorting with half their money, because they can always short and cover and re-extend the loan, which gets into the problem of not being able to have guaranteed liquidity to the people who actually buy the USD, which was the real goal of the system. So you end up having to say, well, you can't short if there's someone who's trying to sell below the feed. They have to take priority, which means that now anytime there's an order, you either can or can't short, and then it's going to be a race. The first person who can short to themselves and get a sell order will stop everyone else. So at the end of the day, you need a line of people waiting to short, and that they will have to be prioritized by some metric. Interest rate seems as good as metric as any other. We end up with the current system. Those who want to short can only short at the feed, and they are prioritized by interest rate. The short only gets matched when there's someone willing to buy at the feed, which means you end up having to buy your own short if you want to do that. And you're competing at interest. Now, basically end up with the system very similar to what we have today.
But then we can expect to have those smart wallets that do self-shorting all the time.
Anytime there's an opportunity to self-short, it is profitable to do so. Yes, I would expect, like any market, arbitrage will be taken when that's available.
So what if in the future the primary liquidity, the primary place or the primary market for liquidity in the system becomes internal exchange instead of BTC 38? Because I think that I'm hoping that will just be a temporary thing, and in the long run, all our on-ramps will be bid assets. Then at that point, I think that 30-day guarantee becomes completely unnecessary because all liquidity will be in that market anyway.
Yes, in the long run, the 30-day guarantee. 30-day guarantee is meant to prevent shorts from shorting it and selling it all the way to zero, is what it's really there for. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep shorting, sell. And if I'm a big enough whale, I can make it go to zero, cause the whole system to lose confidence. I think the way you solve the yield harvesting problem is by not directing the yield to the bid asset. If you don't direct the yield to the bid asset, then what you have to do is BitUSD would not pay a yield. But if you want to lend BitUSD to someone else, then you can get a yield on that. Sort of like locking it into a CD. So that would make BitUSD your checking account. The bond system, and the internal bond system would be your CDs. And the yield on BitUSD is because there is demand for people to borrow it at interest so that they can short at any price rather than just at the price feed.
But another side effects of Rune's attack is that by self-shorting, you can give yourself BitUSD and save that for the future so that you can short at any price later on.
Exactly. Although self-shorting reduces your cover time, right? So if you self-short and then a week you sell it, now you've got to cover in 3 weeks.
So I was going to say that by self-shorting yourself BitUSD, then you don't have to borrow BitUSD from anybody else because you've already got it. So you can avoid paying interest.
Yeah, exactly. The problem is the rational thing is to like roll it over every single day. So like every single person is rolling over all their shorts every day.
Which would be great for our volume on CoinMarketCap.
Yeah, that's true. How much more complicated is it to keep the current system compared to that simpler system, like in terms of developer resources and like long-term problems with the order matching? Like, can it be totally solved in the long run so the current system becomes just as smooth as the simpler system?
We are looking at ways to improve things, but we are taking a longer-term perspective. I think what we will probably do as the short-term solution is to eliminate the one use case that causes odd behavior in the current system, which is shorting at a price that's beyond the feed in whichever direction makes sense, right? You can short to one side if you price the limit on your short, and if there are no other shorts at the wall, then that order can be matched if someone is willing to overpay for their BitUSD. The complexity we have in our system is that we have to sort the orders by both price and interest rate, and maintaining the two indexes to match those orders appropriately is what's causing unexpected behavior. So I think it's going to be you either short at the feed or not at all is probably going to be the approach that's taken. I think that you can't roll over a self-short every single day unless everyone who holds BitUSD wants to keep holding their BitUSD. As soon as there is someone who wants to sell their BitUSD and they put a sell order in at or below the feed, you can't self-short anymore. You have to buy their BitUSD first. So the only time self-shorting is even possible is when there are no sellers of BitUSD, a bear market.
But that only works if the price feed is imprecise. Because if the price feed is perfectly precise, then we should reach the exact point when there's no liquidity at all. So there should always be like the price feed should never have any orders exactly on it if the markets are fully efficient.
The price feed is always going to be a lagging price feed. So that means that someone did an analysis and it can be off by over 1%. If you're going to short, you're going to have to be willing to tolerate a 1% variance in the price that you get for your short order. And that variance is just going to be part of the overall risk in the system. Assuming you're going short and you plan on making money because it's going to go down, you don't short unless you think it's going to fall by more than that variance within your 30-day window. Or at the very least, you're willing to roll over your short position with whatever losses there are. What it will probably mean is that some shorts may choose to cancel their short order whenever the feed is wrong, and you'll have a variable number of shorts in the queue as people are constantly updating their order. So is it a good time to short? Yes. Okay, short. It's a feed wrong by 1%. All right, now I'm not willing to short. People who are trying to get that level of precision on their trades will invariably have high-speed bots and probably have all kinds of extra hedging things. But the people who are just trying to bet on a general market direction don't care too much about that.
We're sitting at just about an hour. Joey D did a little bit of research on the topic about Darkcoin, and I was wanting to know if we could give him a moment to explain it as he understands it.
Well, we are at the 1 hour mark. I'm going to have to cut out here. I read what Joey D posted. I'll make my comments before I head out. A bunch of nodes, you broadcast your transaction, a bunch of nodes recognize it, and then it gets locked. This is kind of the model that Ripple has. You have a consensus set, and all the other clients on the network know it's locked. And so it only takes a couple seconds for all those computers to reach consensus and consider it cleared. So if someone else tries to spend the money, the conflicting transaction is not locked in, and it has to go through the mining process. I'm fairly certain that the locked in information, what happens if someone mines something that's in conflict with what was locked? I suppose that the honest miners out there would simply ignore the block and orphan it. Anyway, it's a very interesting approach. It's an approach very similar to Ripple. And the question is, how fast can you do that step? How fast can you get that? And the other question is, who do you decide who the master nodes are? And so that's the two questions. BitShares decides who the master's nodes are by approval voting. That's as fair and trustworthy method as I can think of to decide on who the master nodes are. We reach consensus by just taking turns having delegate of the moment to declare all the transactions. So that gives us 10-second validation times. These other systems require all the nodes to agree every 10 seconds. And what you'll have is the network latencies, propagation times, bandwidth are all going to be much higher to have 100 nodes agree every 10 seconds versus 100 nodes agree every 16 minutes, taking turns. So I've been looking at ways of enhancing our process, having delegates confirm multiple delegate signatures on a block and prioritizing short forks based on the number of delegates that additionally sign. But if you had 101 delegates sign every block, then you'd end up with 6 kilobytes every 10 seconds, 60 bytes a second. 600 bytes a second, which would cause the blockchain to get much, much bigger. So the master nodes are self-selected by holding a large balance. So it's basically whales get to be the master nodes. There's no accountability. You can't fire them. They apparently get paid. Lots of challenges with their system. It seems like a less efficient, hacked-on, bolted-on approach to what we are doing with delegated proof of stake. But it is clear that people are recognizing there's a need for faster consensus, and they're recognizing that it's the public record, not the proof of work, that secures the network. So in time, everyone's going to eventually come to the same understanding that we have about the fundamental nature of blockchains, which means over time, more and more systems are going to resemble BitShares. That's just my prediction.
Well, thank you very much, Bytemaster, for showing up and always being here to talk to the community, answer the questions, and be the most open developer in cryptocurrency. I think everybody truly appreciates it, and you can tell with the number of people who come here to ask questions and participate in these discussions that it's very effective in gaining trust. And although we call these trustless systems, anything that involves human interaction is anything but trustless. So when you're trying to build a community that has a foundation as solid as rock, it requires a lot of trust and a lot of openness. And I appreciate personally you always coming on and answering those questions and being here to connect with the community on this level. And thank you everybody else for attending.